At times, I am amazed at the speed at which technologies, social context, and human understanding are expanding, evolving, and sometimes disrupting. Yet our lifetime, and even humanity's presence on Earth, has been but a speck in a much larger time frame. Natural patterns have existed for much longer than we have, and whilst many artists have been inspired by nature and these natural forces, now more than ever looking at our natural environment for inspiration seems appropriate in a seemingly increasingly complex digital and technological context. For this podcast episode, I therefore wanted to invite two creators who have been nourishing an ability to envision sensitive possibilities, finding inspiration in nature whilst advocating for progress by exploring emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, augmented reality, and virtual reality to create transformative experiences that blend seamlessly with the physical world. They aim to embrace the boundless potential of human imagination while striving for a future that is not only visually appealing, but also sustainable and, more importantly, meaningful. Breaking disciplinary boundaries, the couple behind Utopia Blu, Tiia, Vahula, and Wilck, are self-proclaimed formalists who look to technology to enable creative innovations that strike the right balance between culture and nature. To discuss their work and to ponder this exciting yet challenging context with me, I'm excited to welcome Tiia and Wilck.
Yay! Thanks for having us.
Thank
Great
you.
to be here.
So to start, could you both share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Tiia and Wilck, we are trained as architects, but at the same time, we create worlds with the tools that we learn from our studies in architecture to create smaller worlds for human scale, but also explore more the emerging technologies and how to bring different disciplines together. So we see world, or at least create a world, a lot more as a sort of a layered interdisciplinary world rather than teaching and learning something and then becoming this architect or artist or sculptor, but it's always a mixture of everything. So we both are trained as architects, but with our own studio, Utopia Blu, we work at least bringing stuff into the physical world in a wearable or body scale, I would say.
You mentioned you're both trained architects, I believe working for a studio in Amsterdam called UN Studio, and the driving force behind Utopia Blu. So before we talk a bit more about Utopia Blu, could you share a little bit about what drove you towards a creative career and where each of your interests in architecture in particular came from?
I actually come from a very math and physics-based education in a normal school environment, and it's often hard to see yourself not starting to study mathematics or physics or chemistry, etc. But architecture seemed like an interesting mixture where you can still bring in your knowledge and interest in the systematic world, but at the same time work with the creative part of your brain and actually do something that everybody needs, meaning creating environments, right? Everybody needs housing, everybody needs some sort of a place to live, and not even just housing, but the places for communities. So this is it's a beautiful dream to be able to make the world a better place for everyone, for ourselves as well, of course. And I think the drive towards an international office and international projects is just also to understand and see the mixture of different cultures, different people speaking different languages, etc. So it's also just learning, right? And it's a good paid base, especially if you can study architecture in an art school environment where you still have influences from all kinds of perspectives, not just structural engineering and putting buildings together from a very practical perspective. So
my mother was in advertisement, so I was also so I grew up in this advertisement office, so a little bit also this atmosphere. But yeah, in the end, I started studying that, but it was more on the economic level. And okay, it was not that fulfilling. So I was all the time interested in layered meanings of art and philosophy, etc. So there was suddenly a door open at the university, and I looked into this door, let's say, and I found my way there to architecture on a certain way. So because architecture, what gives this layers where you can touch science, where you can touch art, where you can touch philosophy, where you can think about realms and rooms and spaces and all that on. So that was a quite fascinating part. I also was interested in graphic design, but yeah, in the end, it was the open door called architecture, which led me further.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I actually have a master in science, which sounds a bit like, I thought, okay, that's very, yeah, what's the scientific part about it? But yeah, it's because it touches everything. It gives you, it is the door you look into and see something interesting. But at the same time, when you're in the architectural study or in the work environment, it opens other doors for you because you get this interesting base for going further with art or science or math or physics even.
So both of you are also behind Utopia Blu. You venture well beyond architecture and take on projects of varying scale, both literally and physically. So what made you decide to start Utopia Blu? And perhaps maybe we can also reflect on what were the limitations you felt within your original discipline that pushed you towards looking for an alternative practice.
As said, I was all the time fascinated by different thoughts also other humans had. So I was specifically interested in art and specific kinds of art. When there was a teacher in Düsseldorf called Joseph Beuys. There was one of his students, Blinky Palermo, and they had a certain connection also to the so-called romanticism. And it is all about the human perception itself, where I am. And this was all the time a fascinating thought. So architecture alone, it's a little, when you say architecture, you can say it is all about space. Okay, what is space? And then what is mental space? And where is me in it? So that's why this is one thing where it doesn't necessarily come directly together. So then we have in architecture today, where we really is economic driven and economic driven needs. So you see a lot of glass facades. You see that as many people interpret this as architecture, but it is actually much more than this. And so I studied then later in Vienna at the University of Applied Arts as Angewandte. And then I came together there with a professor, Hernan Diaz Alonso, he's from Los Angeles. And so there were some steps and some views behind this stage where forms are created, where geometries are created. And so we went there a little further with really abstract forms and really experimental forms and so on. So we started to practice there in a certain way. And there was a kind of nexus between where this art thoughts come together and this architecture, and then you have really expressionistic arts and forms and architectures there. So
it's a little bit like finding this non-rational thought in a very rational world where we are, actually, allow ourselves to have this dream world and keep it also strictly away from making something very, very practical. And also, if we talk about Utopia Blu, we talk about sort of giving dreams a 3D world or bringing them into life. And it has its scale. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's architecture or it's wearable scale. Just in our case, wearable scale is easier to realize. But just the thought of not having to follow the rules. Like, we often talk about, what do you see in your head if somebody says a house? Everybody gets this like little box with a triangle roof on top of it. But is that it? Do we really need to then see the house like that? From a practical perspective, yes. But if we imagine a world of not having to cover the basic needs anymore, would we still create spaces like that? Would we inspire ourselves differently? Where would our imagination push us if we wouldn't, need to cover the basic needs, but we will actually allow us to be creative and create worlds that all of us need? And obviously, again, it's easier or simpler at this moment to address these thoughts and topics on a smaller scale, on a personal scale, and really push the boundaries in either jewelry or wearable or even furniture scale, which is where we realize our ideas at work.
Utopia Blu is a place where we can be that free.
When you work in a certain context like architecture and in jewelry, there is also a need to respond to briefs and a need for your work to be commercially funded.
Yes.
And I think it's quite interesting when you find a way to both realize those projects, because at the end of the day, you have to make a living. We have to also, build practices, but at the same time, you should not let the thoughts that appear when you are doing that kind of work, and which you should be engaging with as designers and artists to nourish that as well. I wonder how you perhaps live with that duality a little bit, respond to commissions, but at the same time not lose your passion for questioning the things that perhaps others might not see the need to question.
There's a world outside, and sometimes you feel suppressed. Yeah, because it was not okay. Now we are here in Amsterdam. I worked also in other offices, and then there's a pretty rational thinking ruling, let's say. The world outside is like that, and I feel sometimes suppressed by that, and also this kind of thoughts are suppressed. And yeah, we have to withstand this a little bit. So it is when we show Utopia Blu, and most of the time, of course, it's welcome to people, but in a daily life, there's a strong rational thinking ruling this world.
And I mean, we need this, right? It doesn't come from just because somebody thought of having this rationalism. There is a certain reason behind it. However, our role as designers, and in this case also architecture in a regular office, it's still, even if we can't solve all the problems or all the questions or bring in as much creativity and innovation as possible, it's still our role to educate ourselves, our clients, our colleagues, and at least talk about it. And it might not always be 100% realized. It might just, come as part of a small part of a project or exist here and there in some way. And, there are bigger networks that are difficult to influence fully, but you can make little steps. So of course, as architects, we still talk about theories and talk about, of course, sustainability. Even it's in some countries it's easier than some others because just the general population or the field is just not educated enough. And how can we make something better, quicker, etc. So we just take the responsibility of doing as much as we can in architecture, but of course in Utopia Blu we can that's our playground right now. Like we pick projects that make us happy, we pick projects that fit us, try to do as much as possible, and go crazy with these briefs, because also those projects often don't come without any brief. There is still a brief, or we create the brief, which is, of course, by the way, also a very good tool or knowledge that you gain from architecture to actually work with those briefs, right? Or create it for yourself. Because in a creative world, you are someone who creates concepts, but at the same time, you have to learn how to realize them. And you can translate, again, that's between the scales. And I think from both ways, there are ways that we can and we are learning for ourselves as well.
And you'd hope that there is that relationship between those two worlds as well. As you do work in one, it relates to the other or inspires the other, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
I liked very much to read that you refer to yourself as formalists. Could you tell us what you mean?
We can refer ourselves as architects or artists or whatever. But in the end, it's all the time, us as humans, right? And all the time this wondering on ourselves, what we are, and the search in ourselves. So that's why this is a kind of timeless topic, and I have the feeling sometimes also in the art, what is appreciated are most political topics or the current things. So, but what we're dealing or what we're really looking for are some timeless things in the center of our existence, where we are. And what the Romantics also said, they said, okay, you can explore your inner self only with in terms of poetry, or with the tools of poetry, let's say. And this is something what we do also. Okay, I'm not a poet, so I'm not using the word in this case. I'm using the form, and I'm using the shape, and I'm using both in exploring my emotions. First of all, because I'm the creator there, and I'm exploring my emotions. When we talk about formalists, then yes, I'm strongly interested in this triggering first my emotions, and of course then, because it's an artwork also, and when it's an artwork, then of course I want to communicate also not only with me but also with the world outside. So also the emotions from everybody else. So that's why when we talk about formalists, then we are strongly interested in these timeless topics like emotions. Yeah. So that's why you will not find any relation to contemporary politics or contemporary meanings or anything. This is completely neutral from that. So this is my core behind that.
Yeah, it's about also then, like Philip said, triggering other people's emotions, and maybe even to the level where they don't know why or what is it that triggers them. So looking at our work, perhaps you don't need to find a rational thought why you like it or why you don't like it. You have some sort of a reaction to it. Very often when I walk around with something that we've been designing, or we have pictures in our house, and people come and they're like, wow, like, what is this? How can I get it? Or like, how did you come up with this? And there is just this emotional level that, of course, you explore with your work, but you also want to bring it to the other people. And it's a communication in the way it's, again, it's, I think how you put it, it's a sort of a poetry in the three-dimensional world, because we don't do it with words, we do it with forms.
Also do it sometimes with words, but
mostly with forms.
No, but this is interesting, because there is a power in a form, I would say. And when you have formless theories, they can feel distant, removed from the self. But as soon as there are forms at play, we can interrogate the ideas behind them much easier, I feel. So as a sense of communication, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a very nice word.
And I find forms do not rely on language, right? You don't need to speak English or whatever language that is more common between people in order to communicate with forms. And that's also another beautiful aspect about it, that has its own value. And us working with different people with different cultures and different language skills, etc., you see where the click comes, and the communication starts by just sharing the ideas on the paper or in a 3D world.
Two examples of very interesting pieces you've made: Spider Dress and Forest Heart or Earth. Both pieces, I would argue, could be classed as jewelry if you're from a disciplinary lens looking at them, responding to the body of the wearer, responding to the environment, and also recording data from it. Could you tell us a little bit more about these pieces, or any other pieces you feel are really signifying Utopia Blu's direction and ideas?
Okay, let's start maybe with the Spider Dress. The Spider Dress is meanwhile also almost 10 years old. So at this time, Anouk Wipprecht, she's a Dutch fashion designer, came to us. So because Anouk Wipprecht is well known for sensoric garments and sensoric fashion. So we were recommended to her because she saw then our design or our design language. Because before I was tried to apply this design language on an architectural scale. But since we have a certain methodology in this design, so we can more or less easily adapt it also from an architectural scale, also to jewelry scale, but in this case also on a fashion scale. And so we came and talked together with her and developed at this time the spider dress. Yeah, the spider dress itself, she had a spider dress 1.0, and it tells a story of personal space. So there are sensors in it, and when you enter your personal space, then the dress reacts on this. And what we, Utopia Blu, gave to this is then the look. As everything what you can see there, these 3D printed pieces and the design itself, the look of the dress, this is then from our side. Yeah, I was also looking all the time, because we talked before being a formalist, and then usually we are focused more on images or pictures or some sculptures or more static things. I wasn't interested all the time to see this somehow on a different level, on a different context. In this case, is fashion quite fantastic, because then you suddenly connect this directly onto the human body, because the spider itself has a strong emotional impact when you see this. So that's why I was highly interested in also to apply then our formal language, in this case, onto a fashion scale.
And I think this technology, well, the production of these kind of pieces, but integrating also technology, whether it's a wearable scale for humans, or we've also done it for robots or drones, etc. But from human perspective, I think it's always also a conversation around sort of getting a superpower or extension of your body with this piece, and what kind of extra abilities would one want to have. And actually both of those pieces, spider dress and also other pieces afterwards, like the forest heart, they deal with larger questions or larger, let's say, topics, not just making you look confident and pretty and look as a superhuman, but actually also try to address topics that could change the world, right? Of course, again, us with a small piece of art, but address a global topic. And the Forest Heart was actually created for a New York AI Week, end of 2019, which is, we all know it was just before COVID hit. And interestingly enough, we talked about the topic of nature and communicating with nature, and actually how people could possibly communicate with ecosystems and therefore create more awareness around climate change, etc. But from a personal level, it was also about loneliness, and how sometimes people, for instance, may perhaps don't want to talk to other people, that they want to communicate with plants or animals, and how would we communicate with plants? And then, of course, 3 months later, COVID hit, and we apparently were all home alone, and this, ironically, became a very present topic at the time around loneliness, etc. So it was. It's always also for us exploring something new, right? And what kind of, let's say, technology is out there that could help the person to experience something new with this wearable piece. But at the same time, of course, it's also formally exploring it. And it's also always about giving an extra ability for the person. Or
the Forest Heart was developed with that was no collaboration, that was only from us, because that was this so interesting part now to have this on a different layer already, this formalistic, what we talked before, but now we connect then the human body, and then we connect this formalistic garment. And we connected this with, or we try to communicate with the world of plants in this case. So that was quite interesting.
I think another interesting part about these bigger pieces is always that it is still interdisciplinary. Of course, there's someone who drives the project, and in our case, we create the look and the visual part of it. But of course, behind all the technology and integration of it, we work with other people as well, right? When for Forest Heart, we had a sound designer creating the sounds or the music for the piece. We had a person who was deeply dealing with the sensors and the plants, right? So we ask, it is interdisciplinary, as of is also architecture and most of the fields. We see a lot in our world how people try to sell a project as it's only their own, and I don't think this is actually right. The bigger the project gets, the more the possibility of it actually having more and more people involved is very high. So yeah, everybody credits credits your team when you work with them.
What I feel from your pieces is that you are very knowledgeable about participation. I guess that might have something to do with when you create spaces, it's not the intention to create spaces no one can touch or no one can inhabit. And I feel with the pieces of jewelry, there is an inhabitation. Is that something you are aware of adding to each of the projects, or is that unconscious?
No, I would say it's concepted as an open system. So of course we are interested in communicating and involving people and involving us, and to see that and to see reactions of people. And no, it's concepted as an open system principally. So that's why, yes, we are a little successful currently more on a smaller scale, because it's especially fashion design. So we had more projects currently together with fashion design, because it's faster and it's easier approachable, let's say. Architecture is a little, yeah, it's especially for this kind of geometries more complicated. So currently that's why we focus more on this smaller scale. Yes, jewelry, you can easily get it on your body and get an easy interaction with that. Fashion is it's a great piece for that, but of course we're looking also for bigger in a bigger scale.
But I think what I want to add here is also what we started off saying, where I was saying why architecture, and I mentioned communities, and I think why do people communicate with each other? Why people come together and create a community? Often when we move to a new city or a new place, it's hard to get to know people, and it's easier when you have a conversation starter, and whether it's a small thing that is a conversation starter or a bigger one, it helps to bring similar interests together and actually create the common ground. And this is perhaps a very, analog way of it. And of course, this whole topic of integrating technology and immersing people into the, a different dream world, that has a little bit of a different angle to it, but it's the still same topic. It's a topic of the community communication and learning from each other, and actually inspiring as well, which is why we also always work with physical pieces, or we always try to prototype as much as possible and bring it out there. Of course, you reach way less people than you would just have pictures online and communicate through, let's say, something that can be on a digital screen, but it has a very different value when you can have physically people interacting with pieces. And that's, for me personally, that's a very interesting part of, where architecture, but also this wearable scale comes together, actually.
So the work you have been creating has embraced a variety of digital technologies. Why are you inspired by digital technologies, and maybe what types of software, computer-aided manufacturing technologies are attractive to you in your work?
So for 3D modeling, classical Rhino or Maya is a strong tool for that. So this comes directly from our training as architects. But as architects, we also drawing. I also use classical things, but to bring this a little further, I embraced digital technologies at a certain point, because I was drawing also as a kid a lot, and for my father, every birthday or Christmas he wanted something self-made for me. Yeah? But I always was struggling with handing over my things as ever. So even as an artist, I would be difficult for me to hand over a handmade piece. So that's why. From a certain point, I embrace this digital technology, because I don't need to give it away. I can keep it, and I have it in the computer, and I can do much more within the computer. So the computer gives a lot of opportunities to evolve on this and to create a process. And so that's why when we dived into the training of architecture, into this also systematics to set up a project. So in similar systematics, you can create an architecture project, but also visual project but then it's again an open system. So we also we can bring in drawings into the computer. We can in paintings. We can in sculptures. We can. So that's why over the years, also for me at least, the computer developed for some reasons then to the core center of the artwork.
So Philip didn't want to give away his only and unique art pieces.
I don't know. I was struggling with that. It was some are really hard for me, and then oh wow, there's a computer, and I can I found another way to replicate those things.
Of course, 3D printing as what we work mostly with. I mean, Philip mentioned like sort of 3D modeling softwares, but 3D printing itself is a very big tool for us. 3D printing offers a range of different materials. Also, you can scale up things easily, right? And try out and be like, okay, this is too fragile. We need to go bigger. We can test things. And also, what it allows you is not to overproduce. So if you would want to produce something in a high level and like order something from a manufacturer, you will have a minimum of 100-piece order or whatever. With 3D printing, you can prototype rapidly and you don't have to overproduce, meaning that you create less waste in the end. Often enough, the materials can be recycled or reused again. So there are different topics around the 3D printing as well. But again, I think principally it's that it doesn't feel like you're giving it away because you still keep the ownership and you can make yourself another one.
And it's really clean, honestly.
And
it's really compact. I can so there are many advantages or fascinating things about doing art or doing design in the computer. But I said, yeah, again, also here an open system. So we are also interested, of course, making models on the side, making drawings, and bring this later into the digital system. So that's why a professor, also Wolf Prix from the Angewandte, he was a bit from the older school, but also really technical driven. That's from Blu. And he said all the time, yeah, but you need to work in a model because the physical, the real world is then the actual open world. And then you, and this is where you gain your information and bring this information then to the computer. I wouldn't agree totally with him, but it's a worthy comment from this side. So also not only being digital, but also working in the transition between real world and what we can call digital world. Yeah? This is important to keep that.
I often have discussions with people about 3D printing and it being, you know, multiplications. You can make multiples of things, but there is also, every time you create an object, it's never quite the same. Do you agree, or do you really feel like every time you create your object, they are true multiplications of each other?
I think it's scale question again and material. And the bigger objects get, the less similar they are. The smaller and more harder materials, metals, for instance, the more similar they are, especially if we talk about really like small jewelry scale, right? You have something that goes through a tumbler and suddenly you have 10 of the same pieces. But the bigger they get, I think they do get sort of their own life and their own soul to it as well. Any of our bigger wearable pieces, I don't think we will just for fun create another one. They are there because they have seen something, they have been in spaces. They also have damage because they fell, or they have, they don't come out of 3D printer and then they're done. You do post-production, you sand them, you paint them, you add electronics or robotic pieces or whatever it is. It's not just something that 3D printer created. But again, it really depends on what the object is and how big it is, I would say. But even if you would do it with your hands, right? I think there are people who are very skilled enough that they can do like objects that look exactly the same without 3D printer as well.
With 3D printers as well, your 3D printer and the softwares that's been created and the layering that it applies and the decisions you make, there is an agency of a tool, and then there is an agency of tools that you use to finish. And all of these variables end up creating pieces that are different each time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Philip didn't mention that, but sometimes what we have been talking about in our world in Utopia Blu is also to actually build in mistakes. Like, so you don't want to make it perfect. You want to make it a bit faulty here and there. Yeah, just the world is not perfect. So why do we try? Like, why should we try to achieve this perfect image of something? So
Yeah. This I'm referring again to Wolf Brix, because he was building everything in models, and he gained a lot of inspiration from mistakes in this model. So when you cut something wrong, or when you do, or you forget a certain piece on top of something, this later you confront really in the building, because he really took this some really as granted. But he denied a little bit that we can do this also in the digital world, but we can, and we are mistakes are welcome, or they're not really welcome, but
it's part of the process.
it is part of the process, and it gives when something breaks, and then something new creates. So mistakes are part of it, and but also quite active and vivid part of it, actually. So also in the digital world, they created also some new lives. Actually.
And printers make mistakes as well, even if you don't want to make the mistake. There's always a level of a possibility for mistakes in the whole process. The more steps you go through, the more different the objects are going to look like, or character is being built.
You have previously shared you believe that the digital world is an integral part of nature, and perhaps that aligns to this and its systems. And as this digital world we talk about evolves, our role as designers may shift to that of mediators and curators. Could you expand on this statement?
So first, maybe on this digital world as part of the real world, I wouldn't see any difference. So because also when we come back to the human existence and to existence at all, that we are actually, our thoughts, our minds, our perception is actually part of let's say it's based on the DNA, and DNA is nothing else than a programming system. So we live already in a virtual world. And what we create then with our abilities, with our brains, so the digital world is nothing else than an expansion. So everything is nature already. So there's no division at all. So sometimes we applied for a certain exhibition, and then they ask our digital art with digital, and they ask us, could you refer a bit more to nature, or could you be more nature related? That's right. This is already a fault in the thinking, because there's no difference. It's already nature, and it will always be. So
I think when Philip says that there is no differentiation,
in the end, in the end,
I think we just have to see ourselves as someone who, in a way, curating this conversation, bringing the awareness and knowledge to people what digital worlds can actually create, right? It's not about creating sculptures and digital art pieces, but also what digital technologies or technologies in general can actually do in order to keep the nature out there, right? And our role as, artists or architects, we can at least open the conversation around the fact that there is no big total separation. We are merged, we are connected to each other. And once we see that everything is part of everything, it's also easier to understand that it's not an opposition, it's actually an integrated system that needs to become better as a whole. We can't just now delete the digital world and say we're all going to live under a tree and never do anything. It's never going to happen, right? It's going to evolve. We just need to know how to work with it and how to use it for an advantage. And in the end, everybody is a curator there to see how can we make it better, or how can we actually add value to it instead of trying to see the opposition and the fight between those things. I think
it's also this concept of mind and body, as if mind is separate from body and body can be separate from mind.
Yes, exactly.
It's very interesting that you pose it that in such a way, and I think we as designers should be much more aware of the capacity we can have in these kinds of debates, like what role we can play. Recently, you presented work in a show titled Augmented Gems. Of course, as a jeweler, could not mention this project to you, where the digital realm, including artificial intelligence and augmented reality, transcending physicality, were explored. Could you share a little bit more about what you presented and what you think is very exciting about the use of these types of technologies in the creative industries, and also in relationship to the importance of perhaps physical objects and digital objects?
Augmented Gem was about actually introducing artificial intelligence, because this is a current thing which is really coming up. And as designers who work with mainly digital things, we have to face with that. First, let's talk a little bit maybe about AI. This is now a new competitor actually on the field, and we need to see how to deal with that, also in a practical way. And sometimes now when you go on our website, some people they say, oh wow, okay, everything AI, and so oh wow, it's actually not. There's a huge difference, because some of the project like spider dress or things, so we just saying, so it takes maybe in half years, several thousand euros for 3D printing and for time and cost and blah blah blah. And after a half year, maybe we have 5 images, and then boom, it's nice. And then with AI, suddenly I can go to the gym, sitting there, and create within a half hour 50 images, which look amazing. So, but without the background or anything. So, but anyway, just denying is not a solution. So, okay, of course we have to test this, how to bring this AI, which is there, to the design process. Are there ways? So a year ago we were stronger interested in it. Meanwhile, we shifting again a little bit apart from this and trying to go the old school way.
Coming back to the augmented gems, it was a group exhibition, and of course Philip introduced a little bit of our general thinking around how to integrate technologies, or in this case as much as possible the AI into it. The question general was like, how far can we take away the creator, or how far can we lose the physical craft or the traditional craftsmanship from jewelry, or from this, like in this case it was a jewelry exhibition, so we addressed the topic of jewelry or smaller objects in this case. And when we were thinking about the exhibition and also the integration of digital worlds, and is a hologram a piece of jewelry? Can a QR code tattooed on your finger be a jewelry piece if you scan it and it becomes a digital image of something? Or can you train an AI to generate you actually everything from learning and then 3D printing it for you in the end? And what are the risks, or what are the issues that emerge around it? But again, the point was that we're gonna end up with physical objects. But the kind of this like overlaying question there was always like, what is going to be there if the lights turn off or we don't have electricity? Like if you would take away electricity and lights, we are going to end up with only physical objects. So you have to, whatever the process before that is, the moment you end up with a physical object, is it crafted by hand or crafted with the help of digital or the program or 3D printing or any other tool that might come in the future? Doesn't really matter. But we can still communicate and exchange ideas and feelings and share things if the lights turn off or there's no electricity. And that was the sort of the underlying topic that we kept working on around this exhibition, that obviously we're going to end up with physical objects, but the stories or the tools, how people got to generate those were different. And in our case, we tried to sort of eliminate us as much as possible, or get as much as possible inspiration from using digital tools and then bring it back to the digital world. And it was sort of like messing with your head a little bit. How can a digital object then become physical, and the other way around again, like how we have face filters and sort of becomes part of the internet world again once it's actually been in a physical world as well. So it was this blurry conversation and blurry field between these two worlds.
It sounds very exciting and very challenging to contemplate, particularly in today's context as well, where we know the challenges of being an identity on the internet and that being open to so much interpretation, and then knowing all that data that's being used without ethical procedures in place to protect, and how biased all that is. It's these tools have sparked a lot of debate, craftsmanship, authenticity, originality. What are your thoughts on these subjects, and do you see yourselves as designers dangers in using these tools, considerations you'd like to apply yourself to working with them, or that you would recommend others to contemplate whilst applying these tools?
I want to say from upfront that I think we all need to see it as just one tool. Just currently, it's so visible, so much spoken about. It feels like that is the only tool. It will never become or remain the only tool. For people who now like kind of use this as the only tool and shine, that's good, but it will stabilize. It will just become part of our daily existence, like I don't know, TV or phones, etc. And we will see or learn how to integrate this into our systems. And in the end, I don't think it's about AI creating everything for us, whether it's text or image or whatever generation it's doing. It's just helping us. And it's up to us how we use it, right? And what our skill sets are. I think people deeply into those softwares or very knowledgeable about something specific, let's say image creation with an AI, there can be really, really cool things that can be done with those. But at the end, it's still the question, why? What's the concept, or what's the, or in this specific room in the exhibition, what are people getting out of it? And if you can answer that, whether you did it with an AI or you did it with your hands, does it matter in the end? But I think a lot right now is just like this kind of trash. Again, if we can see this as a tool and realize or understand, I think mainly maybe for students or people who just start with it, you have to learn everything in order to be against it. So I think as a traditional jeweler or architect or whoever you are, you can't be against something. You need to know it very well in order to be against it. So if you can argue it then with all the knowledge that it's a bad thing or it's a good thing, then it's a different conversation. But a lot of statements nowadays are being made based on some experience, whatever kinds of experience. Is it a sensory overload, or is it the opposite, that I became so successful with just creating AI images, or wrote a book with a ChatGPT? You know, it's learning. It's learning how to work with it.
Yes, but let's tell maybe quickly the story about recent experience with the Hong Kong Design Institute, where we are teaching students currently, and we had a course there. It was a crossover studio between architecture students, fashion students, and jewelry students, and we had a little bit condensed program within 2 or 3 months or something. So, but we go with them through the whole design process, really from the scratch. Where we, because this whole course was called Blue Tenix, where we took inspirations from the nature, and in this case from flowers, and then we mixed them up with the superpowers. So we took some morphologies from the plants, then they modeled it in 3D, as a classical in Rhino, as with sub-D, with sub-D modeling, and then underlaying this layer then with some superpowers, and then the end was a certain garment or a certain piece, a variable piece in the end. This was the outcome. So, but we did everything. So we did from the scratch development, then to the 3D modeling, then to the 3D printing, and then they had the pieces. Then they had to craft these pieces, so they had to color it, blah, 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 and combine it with some fashion pieces. And then we made the photo shoots, so the real photo shoots. So we had this whole program, and then in the end we had some beautiful images. So we could have done this much more easy. So we could have an afternoon with them, and then also AI. We could have produced much more interesting images maybe with the AI. But also because we saw this in this process, because the students got involved, and because within the superpowers, we asked the people, okay, what is your personal superpower? And then they discussed it, and then we get in the end a multi-layered design in the end, because, and also in the photo shoots, they were the models themselves. So they were really in the end, it was a highly personal experience. The whole thing was not a design object in the end. It was also first and also a process, but it was also a really highly personal event and experience. Also, I think really valuable for us and also for their lifetime, maybe. Yeah, so that's why, and some images have then a complete different meaning than some quick images I can create somewhere else. So because there was this whole, and then they're exploring themselves, they're exploring what they wanted, they like what kind of flowers they liked and why, asking why and discussing why and what. So that's why the outcome was from a complete different value. So
the learning process, of course, with clicking an image or creating an image from a prompt can be seconds, but actually learning how to build up a concept has a totally different value. And for us, it was very interesting to observe this. And also from the perspective, like I mentioned before, that 3D forms don't have a language. And being in Hong Kong, we had a lot of students that, again, English wasn't their first language. So it was a different communication as well to actually see them talking or communicating with diagrams, images, little pieces of 3D model, etc., and bring it to life. And like Philip said, in the end, it could have been just 5 images created with an AI, but the whole process for the students and the university was so much more valuable in order to the fact that we went through this process.
Yeah, usually they're also a bit shy there. They have a face mask and so on there. But we saw some people, some students really shining in the end, and so it's so worthy. That's why,
yeah, it was really beautiful then.
Yeah, so when we talk about craftsmanship and authenticity and originality,
so even though we use digital tools to get there, there was actually a lot of it involved, right? The creativity, authenticity. It was just the outcome used different traditional tools. I think 3D printing became already a traditional tool, and I mean, well, it's so long on the market, it's not a new thing anymore.
We live in a world where outcomes seem to be appreciated, but it's actually our time here is about, I would say, is about skills and learning and spending the time to understand practices. And if you generate an image which is based on data you have absolutely no knowledge of, how much engagement are you having? How much are you learning from that interaction? Whereas if you go to the process, that time is valuable. And sometimes slow design is exactly what the planet needs today, because we've already got enough.
Don't need more stuff.
No, exactly. So it's a cultural shift in us reappreciating and revaluing process and time spent on creation rather than outcome-based thinking. But it is not culturally currently in a capitalist context always appreciated that way. So that is a challenge for our generation and the next generation to work on, I would say, right? So to anyone listening who may be interested sort of in these digital technologies you've experimented with, how do you get started? Like, are there any books that you recommend, YouTube channels, softwares that are really easy to start with, other resources that helped you or that you in your project recommended to students previously that you would say get going with that?
I think if it comes to 3D printing and 3D modeling, we mentioned a couple of times Rhino. It's just a tool that yes, architects use, but it doesn't need to be used by architects. And I wouldn't mention any specific, YouTube channel or source there. There's a lot of content out there. I think a lot of people who are traditionally trained to do something with their hands are just a bit scared to jump into the digital tools. And to be very honest, no one ever taught me digital softwares. We were just like, okay, cool. Now you just we need you to do this. Just like I was just thrown into this world to figure it out on my own. Like
this is also a really long process, honestly, because you start in your studies, and because recently we were also in touch, of course, with some fashion schools, because after our experience in Hong Kong, they had the situation that it was a crossover, because then architects brought the knowledge how to use a 3D program. Unfortunately, in the fashion world is surprisingly analog still. So also the analog thinking. Digital tools, they use it differently, but definitely not in a way that they start to 3D model something. So also when you starting with that, so maybe sometimes, okay, maybe you shouldn't do everything on your own. Maybe sometimes it's also interdisciplinary, look for somebody who can help you with it. Maybe you are talented then in sketching or something, and then there's a neighbor, he's an architect. So, and then there's a big potential in collaboration and this interdisciplinary approach to that. Because learning's a program like this, and it's like a music instrument, so then it takes a while to get.
Yeah, of course, but what we also tried to do with the crossover studio in Hong Kong was to demystify this digital software, we shouldn't do it. But yeah, learning from each other is always the quickest way to get out there. And again, actually the personal or the human relationship is the easiest to bring that knowledge out there. We obviously we have hundreds, thousands of online tools out there that everybody can learn everything, but if you don't have a reason to do it, you're also not going to learn it. So to create yourself a project or have a project given by someone else and then try to learn it from that context, it's a lot easier than just be like, hey, now I want to learn this or that without actually knowing why am I doing it, because you don't have a deadline, you don't have a brief. Always create yourself a brief if there is no brief. Otherwise, we're never going to end up with projects finishing.
What are your plans for Utopia Blu in the near future? Is there anything listeners could keep an eye out for? And if they want to stay up to date with your work, where should they look?
Now the next upcoming project is one 3D printed dress, but this is what we do only for us, because it's also the narrative of Utopia Blu itself. So there will be in the center will be a romantic poem, and then there will be a dress around. So we have a photo shoot end of September. Then in October, we will be on a Dutch Design Week. And what we did for Forest Heart, this time we will do it for robots. So we have some small army of small robots. They get a 3D printed garment and dress, and then we will connect them with plans. Why we do that, the story will come then. Why is it a good idea? Because we're looking a little bit in our future clients. Maybe robots are good for that.
I mean, our website is always the place where I think we have the most information.
Social media, of course.
That art and artfully created objects are important to support our enjoyment, exploration, and understanding of our changing context has unequivocally been proven. Artists and designers should therefore ask themselves challenging questions. What impact do the materials I use have? What is unseen when it comes to the technologies I employ? And how do the artifacts I create influence my environment and others? Digital technologies can be powerful tools and equally can cause significant harm. Awareness and knowledge, as my hosts have previously proclaimed, are required to enable us to find the right balance between humankind's powerful presence and the natural environment of the beautiful planet that is our host. This is not a simple task, and for their efforts in bringing these debates to the forefront and for speaking to me today, I would greatly like to thank you both, Tiia and Wilck. It has been a pleasure to hear what you have been working on, and we definitely look forward to see your future projects.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Next month, I'll be joined by another guest, so watch this space to find out who it is. But for now, this was Sophie Boons for the BAJ podcast episode titled Wearable Utopia Blu with Tiia and Wilck. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.